Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of our folks who are participating on this with me and who will share their stories with you, because I think it's so important that we all understand what is happening to our veterans and to the VA. And thank you to all the press who's joined us for this as well. Many of you know I am the daughter of a veteran. My dad fought in World War II and received a Purple Heart. I remember growing up how his VA benefits made such a huge difference for us. They made it possible for him to get the medical care he needed for his MS, even when times were tough. So when I say we have a moral obligation to care for our veterans and their families, this is really personal to me. And when I see Musk and Trump firing VA workers left and right, when I hear that they now plan to fire over 80,000 more VA workers, you can bet I will not be quiet about this, because those staffing cuts are a benefit cut for our veterans. So I'm going to raise hell and raise the alarm and raise up the voices of the veterans who can speak firsthand what is at stake here, which is exactly why I put this call together. The stone cold reality is that massive VA layoffs will hurt and even endanger veterans. And that is not some theory, that is what we are already seeing. They laid off over 2,000 VA workers already. I have heard directly from VA researchers here in Washington State who are being fired. That will undermine research to prevent veteran suicide, build life-changing prosthetics, and treat opioid addiction, and more. I have heard from claims raters in Washington State who were fired. That is going to mean longer wait times for veterans who are trying to get their disability claim approved. And really upsetting, I am hearing from veterans themselves in Washington State who are already getting cut off from the care that they need. One veteran who reached out to my office was told by their mental health care provider he has to start seeking care elsewhere. The VA provides some of the best mental health care in the country, but now he has to find a new provider outside the VA who may not understand what he has gone through as a veteran, and wait times are longer. Another veteran who has stage 4 cancer due to Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam learned that the scheduling team that helps him get to and from treatments was cut in half. That is what's happening right now, today, after Musk and Trump carelessly kicked out over 2,000 VA workers. But now they are talking about cutting over 30 times as many. They're talking about over 80,000 more VA workers gone for no real reason. It defies all logic and reason to pretend that it's not going to hurt veterans. These cuts will increase wait times. They will end medical research. They will shutter healthcare providers, and they will cut veterans off from the healthcare that they need. It could mean they are delayed, perhaps getting a new artificial leg so they can go hiking or be with their family. It could mean delays getting mental health support during a crisis. Or it could mean delays getting treatment as they fight for their life against cancer that is related to burn pit exposure. These are women and men who put their lives on the line for our country. We should be rolling out the carpet for them to get the care they need, not slamming a door in their face. But that's what these firings represent. They are slamming the door on veterans in need. What Trump and Musk are doing here is disrespectful, it's unpatriotic, and it's ungrateful. And I'm going to be fighting back as hard as I possibly can to make sure every veteran has access to the care they need, and that no veteran gets cut off by a couple of billionaires who don't know what they're doing and don't seem to care who they hurt. So I am asking everyone to join me in demanding that Trump administration reverse course on these massive staffing cuts and bring back the critical employees they have already laid off with zero justification. I wanted you to hear from some of the people who are on the front lines of this And again, I want to thank all of the folks who have agreed to speak out today. It takes courage to be able to come forth on this, and I want to thank every one of you. And with that, Future, let's start with you.
Good morning. My name is Future Joe, and I'm a proud U.S. Army veteran. I served our country for 12 years as a supply sergeant before medically retiring in December 2023. Throughout my military career, I developed a deep sense of duty and commitment, values that I intended to carry into civilian life. In July 2024, I accepted a position as an inventory management specialist at the Puget Sound VA. In this role, I represented the supply chain department during our daily critical shortage meetings with nurse managers, ensuring that essential supplies were available each morning for surgeries and procedures. I also managed recall notifications, searching for and removing any equipment or medication on recall that could harm veterans. Additionally, I served as an approver and purchaser for all office supplies requested by the Seattle VA and its 7 community-based outpatient clinics. This position was not only a continuation of my commitment to service, but also an opportunity to contribute to an organization that, in my view, exists to honor and support veterans. I quickly earned the trust and respect of my colleagues. Both my supervisor and section chief recognized me as a critical member of our logistics team, a testament to the hard work and dedication I brought to the role. I was shocked and deeply disappointed when I received an email on Monday, February 24th at 1:56 p.m. notifying me of my immediate removal from my position. I was left with the task of informing my supervisor, my section chief, and my HR of this decision without the chance to undergo a formal assessment of my performance. I am confident that given this opportunity, my performance would have clearly and far exceeded the standard expected for someone in my role. Unfortunately, I was not alone. 5 other logistics personnel in our probationary phase were dismissed within hours of me, 2 mail clerks and 3 supply techs. The unprofessional manner in which these decisions was executed was incredibly disrespectful. I have since visited my office and because I still receive my care at the Seattle VA and witnessed firsthand the undue stress and devastation that these indiscriminate firings have caused. Our supply team is now more than 7 days behind on placing critical supply requests for medication and equipment in our hospital, and our supply techs have had to cut their night shifts, limiting deliveries to our clinics. I saw nurses going down to the warehouse to collect their own supplies in order to continue to provide quality care to our veterans. I am not confident that the hospital can remain open under these conditions. I joined the Department of Veterans Affairs with the belief that the values of honor, integrity, and respect, principles I learned in the military, would be mirrored in the treatment of employees and, more importantly, every veteran. Instead, this abrupt dismissal has deeply eroded my confidence in an organization I once held in high regard. Today, I stand before you not only as a veteran who has served this nation, but also as someone who remains committed to fairness and accountability. I sincerely hope that my experience will serve as a catalyst for the necessary changes within the Department of Veterans Affairs, and this mistake is rectified promptly. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your commitment to ensuring that every veteran is treated with dignity and respect that we deserve. Thank you.
Thanks so much for,
Let's turn it over to you.
yeah, thank you. And thank you, Future, for your work for veterans and for the VA. My name is Christian Helfrich. I'm a health systems researcher. I was a core investigator at VA Puget Sound until February 12th. I began my career at the VA at VA Puget Sound in 2005 as a postdoctoral fellow, conducting research on improving the quality of care for heart attacks in VA. And I had the good fortune of getting hired on as a research investigator after my fellowship. And I've gotten to work with some fantastic veterans and some fantastic clinicians as a result. My field of study is called implementation science. I study the gap between what we understand to be the best quality care available, the best based on the best available evidence, and the care that we deliver. And oftentimes there are gaps in every health system. There's a gap. And in my research, I work with other researchers and clinicians to understand why those gaps exist and how we close them. And just a couple of examples, I worked with colleagues in pulmonary medicine to study how we could use the electronic health record innovatively to identify patients with obstructive pulmonary disease who might not be on the best combination of medicines possible, or might have been misdiagnosed and actually have heart disease, heart failure. And then those pulmonary teams could use the electronic health record to make recommendations to the patient's primary care provider and improve their care. I also worked with colleagues evaluating the new Oracle electronic health record, which is replacing the VA computerized patient record system, CPRS. And we did interviews and surveys with clinicians and staff using the electronic health record to try to identify problems early on and report those problems to people in positions of leadership who might be able to do something about it. As a VA researcher, my work is funded through competitive grants. And because we're grant funded, I'm hired into a position called a term position, meaning that every 3 years we have to be renewed. That date, it's called a not to exceed date, or NTE. Normally, renewal is a formality. It's based on whether or not we're, just like Future said, we're doing our work well and performing the way we're expected to. And in our case, researchers' case, our ability to successfully compete for grants. But I and 6 of my colleagues here at VA Puget Sound in research, our NTE, our not to exceed date, just happened to be in February after the hiring freeze was initiated, went into effect. And even though all of us were funded, even though all of us are actively working on grants and contracts, we were laid off as a result. Our research and development leadership and our facility leadership, who've been excellent throughout this whole experience, in my experience, immediately requested exemptions for our positions. But as I understand it, the Office of Personnel Management declined to provide those exemptions. And we found out, again, much like Future, we found out those exemptions had not been granted on February 11th, about 36 hours before our terms ended. And in terms of what what the effect will be on veterans, for the work I do, it's an impact that's going to happen in the future. I think it's an impact that we'll see 5 years in the road, or 10 years in the road, or 20 years in the road. It's not having innovative care developed in the VA, like pulmonary teams using the electronic health record to identify problems for veterans before they happen, preventing things like pneumonia. And it's not doing things like having people systematically identifying problems with the new Oracle electronic health record and communicating that to people in positions of leadership. Research is an investment in the future, and if we don't invest in research today, we are not investing in the future of the VA. And I'll just add, what's going on right now isn't a two-way door where you can tear down the VA and then see what happens. And if you don't like it, go back to the way it was. This is a one-way door. If we tear it down now, it is going to take years or decades to build back. Thank you, like Future, thank you for listening to my story. And to all the veterans, thank you for your service. One of the privileges of working at the VA is getting to work with awesome veterans, many of whom serve as VA employees. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Dan.
Christian, thank you very much. My name is Dan Foster. I live in Olympia, Washington with my wife, Jennifer. We've been married 35 years. I am a military retiree myself, and since leaving the Army in 2014, I've been a transition assistance counselor. I have been a training manager for military linguists, and for the last 3 years, I've been working to support a contract that is part of the transition assistance program for the Department of Veteran Affairs. And what we did was provide training materials, research support, management tools for the VA office, who's responsible for training nearly 200,000 transitioning service members every year. As a veteran myself, I can tell you I was able to watch the evolution of services that are meant to assist service members and their families or their caregivers when transitioning from life in or around the military into that civilian world and workforce. Service members, they've earned benefits and services that are an important step in that process, and exploring that information can be pretty daunting. It's a scary time when you're getting out of the military, especially if you spent a lot of your life there. The civilian world is scary, and there's a lot to know, and you're trying to figure this out. And luckily, Congress had mandated a course called the Benefits and Services course to provide that information directly to transitioning service members as part of the process of leaving the military. And these courses can also be retaken. So if you didn't quite absorb it all on transition, you can reach out to it later. Some courses are available even for some of the services you would get while you're still serving, such as the GI Bill or for the Home Loan Guarantee Program. So my job as a contractor, I was part of the team developing these important materials for service members. And the benefits themselves are constantly changing due to either policy changes, due to legislative changes. Therefore, it was really imperative that, the audience could get timely and accurate information regarding their benefits, because when the PACT Act was passed not long ago, that was something we had to work into our training to make sure that people knew what they could do. And this support and this training, we were abruptly cut off with 874 other VA contracts the week of February 24th as part of DOGE actions. And that meant that myself and nearly 100 others on our contract alone had about 12 hours notice that we were going to be without jobs. A substantial number of my colleagues are veterans like myself, and we had found a way to continue to serve our country and our fellow service members with our unique skills and abilities. And that opportunity has now been pretty unceremoniously ended, and we're all kind of wondering what's next. Ending this contract is going to directly affect dozens of veterans and their family members immediately, and that's just on my contract. And there's 875 other contracts there. Beyond that, I can't even guess what the effects are going to be on the program that has helped so many veterans as they're transitioning out. Again, 200,000 a year. And the fallout just reminds me of those times before we really started looking and growing and developing the VA over the last few decades to make it a better service for our service members and for those veterans. And, support was sporadic then. I don't know how it's going to continue from there. We're not fulfilling the obligations to those who served. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my story and the plight of literally thousands of veterans or family members in both federal employment or contract support to government agencies who have suddenly found themselves in an uncertain state. And again, Senator, I thank you for your time, your attention, and I will pass over to Sean.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Like all of you, I am a U.S. Army veteran. I did serve in Iraq. And I am actually here because I'm the president of a local nonprofit here in the VA Puget Sound that actually coordinates services for housing our homeless, dealing with mental health crises, and then cross coordination with the private, public, and nonprofit sector. So as a mix between a social enterprise and direct service provider, we look at how do we support these veterans. And in this case, we've seen just a huge uprising of individuals who have gone from job stability, employment, successful careers, as all of you have stated, to now where we're seeing individuals calling in daily. I mean, we've seen a 10% increase in less than 30 days of individuals suffering with suicidal ideation who are proud service members who have put their time in at the VA, who have dedicated their lives to making positive change. And now we're looking at the downside of this. We're looking at the reduction of force of a system that historically has not worked in the best benefit of the veteran. And as a veteran, I have no problem saying that. Just for the simple fact that I've had a family member in every war dating back to World War II, my grandfather. So to see the progress that the VA has made and to the direct interventions, leading the way in, medical interventions and in all the pieces that make up the VA in the last 10 years. I mean, when I got out, I slipped, tripped, and fell into every bad choice and need that a veteran could do. And it was through the kind and caring people at the VA that I was able to climb out of that and develop my own organization. And when I say that we are doing the targeted interventions from housing to mental health to support services, it's you're seeing it everywhere across the country. I mean, to Dan's point, and I think the senator said it best earlier, it's really about what does this do for access? What does this do for those points of contact where we are doing the direct intervention? VA is not just a hospital. I mean, yes, it's the biggest medical system in the world, but it's intervening in every social aspect of how we provide that targeted care that these veterans have earned. They've paid for it with their service. So to me, it's not only ludicrous, but it's unethical. It's there's no words to put it in, but To clarify, that is why I'm here today, because I can talk to that increase of the need and what that's going to look like over the next 3 to 5 years if we don't do the early intervention. I think it was Christian who stated, let's not throw it at the wall and see what sticks and hope for the best. It's let's do the proactive approach and realize these veterans served. There are severe comorbidities that face every different population of veterans on this planet, and it is our moral and ethical responsibility to continue to take care of them. I see them every day, from our chronically homeless to our mentally in need, I guess is the best way to put it. Um, but with the VA downsizing and shrinking access to those services, all it's going to do is put more pressure on a system like the nonprofit region, which the cross coordination of the last 10 years has been a pillar of success. And the evidence base is staring us right in the face. So to take that away is causing even more burden on a system that doesn't have access to all those resources, that doesn't have access to deal with the sheer number of individuals that will have to target different care outside of the VA if this continues to happen. But yeah, so thank you, Senator.
Yeah, well, thank you to each and every one of you. And I so appreciate all of you sharing what will happen to veterans, even though you personally are all living with what's happening to you and your family, having just lost a job too. And I know how hard that is for each of you. But thank you for speaking out passionately for the people you serve with and serve for, and that is our veterans. So thank you. Naomi, we can turn it over for questions from the press if you'd like.
Great. We have some time for questions. If folks just want to use the raise hand function, if you'd like to ask a question, we will call on you. And we can start with Orion.
Thank you, Naomi, and thanks everyone for doing this call. I hope you can all hear me all right. I apologize, I'm out in public here. I have a few questions, and if there's time, I'll come back around maybe for another. But to start with, Christian, I'm particularly interested in the Oracle EHR implementation, as you know, which of course started in Spokane and has since expanded throughout the inland Northwest and beyond. I wonder first if you could confirm if it's your understanding that there is now no more surveying being done of DA providers and employees about how the system is working, and if you could just talk about what it means. I know you spoke to this a little bit, but what it means not to have that sort of ongoing review of the implementation and that the impact of that new EHR.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, you may have more current information than I do. When I left, we were actually preparing the next survey, which was going to go into the field this week. It was the next survey of the current sites, the 5 VA sites, and then the Lovell FHCC in combined site. And I think one of the things with those surveys. The team that I was a part of also conducted interviews with frontline staff. Is it revealed some of the earliest problems? When you mentioned Orion, you mentioned Spokane, when those issues were emerging with medications being duplicated. There was supposed to be a clean break between CPRS prescriptions and entry of medications in the new medical record. Some of them got duplicated. There was the unknown queue where referrals were made and would get sent into a kind of queue, a kind of list that providers were not aware of. Things like that came up very early in those interviews and surveys, and were able to be reported up. And I got to say, one of the things that it was really remarkable in the past year was we had had a really good working relationship with the Office of Health Informatics about using those survey data and reporting them back to specific leaders at the central office, VA central office, to try to act on them immediately. I had not heard that they were not doing any further surveys, and that's kind of shocking. I would think that that's been really critical information. I'm shocked to hear that.
Well, and just to clarify, has your team or your former team been eliminated altogether?
No, not so far as I know. They remain in place, and again, and I thought that they were moving forward with the survey. We were very careful about making sure that when I left, we handed things off so that survey could go forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm told that that's been canceled by VACO, but thank you.
Well, thank you for that information. I'm
For everyone,
horrified
I
by
know
that.
Ryan knows this, but for everyone else who's listening, the VA is started transitioning their medical records to a new system 6, 8 years ago. Huge impacts. The records didn't transfer correctly. I won't go into all of the challenges, but we basically found out about it from VA workers themselves that medical records weren't transferring correctly. It was putting patient safety in jeopardy. All kinds of things. All started in Spokane. It is frightening to me that that is being eliminated because that is how we have found out pretty much everything we know over the past 6 years about whether this system is working or not.
All right. If anyone else has a question, if you want to use the raise hand function, or I'm not seeing hands raised. So if there's, oh, great. We'll move over to Jory and you can just say your name and outlet.
Hi, Jory Heckman with Federal News Network. Just following up with Orion's excellent line of questioning on the EHR. All of this is happening at a time when Secretary Collins is looking to accelerate the rollout of the electronic health record, the new one from Oracle Cerner. I'm just wondering if you have concerns just given the acceleration of that timeline and what we're seeing now with this, significant downsizing in staff and talent and resources.
Jory, I'll start, but certainly want to hear from our veterans as well. When Secretary Collins came before us, he said that they wanted to move ahead with Oracle. But my question to him, I believe at the time was, are you going to do it to make sure that patients are safe? Are you going to make sure that you're talking to the VA providers themselves to know that? And what I am hearing now is that he assured me it was. But what I'm hearing now is no, it's full speed ahead, whether it works or not. We're just going to jam it through without any of the input we need to make sure that patients are safe.
If there's anyone else who has a question, before we go back to Ryan, anyone else is raising their hand or wants to unmute and ask a question. If you're not able to figure out the raise hand function, I'll just give folks a second to do that. And not seeing anyone on that, we'll go back to Orion for a question.
Thank you. This may be a question for future for Dan, but anyway, I'd appreciate hearing from anyone on this. One of the roles that VA has played historically is employing a lot of disabled veterans. And we've heard from the administration and from Elon Musk and Doge that there's this perception that a lot of the VA employees are just not doing a good job or not even working. I wonder if any of you could speak to that claim on number one on its face, and then the idea that or the role that VA plays, the importance of VA as an employer, and the fact that so many of these fired probationary employees and the non-exempt employees who may yet be fired under the reduction in force would be disabled veterans themselves.
I can start with that. So I myself am a disabled veteran. I was hired under a 10-point veteran preference, and I can speak to my particular logistics team at the VA Puget Sound. We were almost 90% disabled veterans on our team. The firings directly targeted the probationary employees, who are the young workforce coming in to replace our older veterans that are soon to retire. So there's a really immediate impact on the transfer of knowledge. But as you can tell from my remarks, I was only there for 7 months and I was already in charge of 3 critical functions in the hospital. And that speaks to my competence and my ability to do that job. And I was working with an excellent group of people. We were severely short-staffed, and we were still completing our mission every single day to serve veterans. So I don't think that those remarks are founded at all, that we were unqualified and any of that information. That veterans preference gets you in the door for an interview. It does not get you the job. You still have to be fully qualified to complete the tasks given in that position. And I can definitely speak for the team that I worked with. They were all excellent individuals that were absolutely amazing at their jobs. And they do not deserve to be put under all this undue stress and hear all these remarks about their service not being of quality, because that is just disrespectful and really disheartening for us in the workforce looking at one another every day as we work hard, work extra long hours, work overtime on weekends just to make sure that we are meeting our quotas. For somebody to go on the news and say that we're incompetent or that we're lazy is just completely false.
And I'd like to echo what I can. Please, again, keep in mind, I was a contractor rather than a federal employee myself. However, several members of our contract are also veterans, either disabled or even not. And we also, everyone we worked with in the VA, as I'm tracking, were themselves a veteran there. So as that office, as I understand, is taking cuts as well, those are veterans who are losing their jobs. And when it comes down to the idea that, well, this was some sort of charity or something that was handed out to us, absolutely abhorrent to hear that as a veteran, as somebody who works hard, who's with a team that works hard, who works for an organization that is absolutely invested in what they can do for their fellow veterans or their transitioning service members. It is just abhorrent to me. I have very strong feelings on that matter. Let's put it that way.
I'd also like to add, so I'm not a veteran. We have a number of veterans in our research office. And one of the things that made working at the VA such a pleasure and such a privilege is the commitment to the mission. And that was exhibited by no one more to a greater extent than the veterans in our office. And made it, they're absolutely fantastic. They brought it every day.
Well, and I would just like to finish that echo by saying, we talk about culturally competent care, right? So when you come into a system that is been efficacy test after efficacy test have been done to show the consistency with that natural rapport. And, just like Christian, even though he's not a veteran, he gets to experience that firsthand. He gets to build that rapport with his colleagues who do have that veteran history, who do have that understanding. So that concept of whole health care, now you have that embedded piece of veteran cultural competency, which anyone who's worked with a veteran for longer than 5 minutes can understand why that is completely appropriate. But again, I think to Future's point, these aren't people who are just walking out of the military and walking into the VA to get high-level positions. These are individuals who do have those credentials, that post-secondary education, that high-level, oversight. And I think that's something that we do need to take into consideration when we think about why this is happening. So,
Ryan, I would just add that anybody who can make a statement that crass and wrong has never taken 5 minutes themselves to walk through any veteran facility, veteran provided care, or talk to veterans themselves.
All right, and next we'll go to Ashley with State's Newsroom.
Hi, my question is for Sean specifically. Can you talk about the interaction a little bit more between your nonprofit and the VA and any, and elaborate on impacts that you see coming down the pike for mental health care for veterans?
absolutely. So as a nonprofit that works closely with the VA, and to be more targeted with that answer, we do work with the Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships, the National Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships, under a very targeted MOU and MOA for coordinated entry. So my job historically has been to touch veterans 120 days before they get out of service, which is 360-degree difference from when I got out of the service, right? We had 30 days, 10 classes, good luck, God bless, here's your DD 214. Hope you achieve something. But with following the PACT Act and the largest VA, marketing campaign in history, it was the ability to bridge care, right? So think of it as a positive overlap. You have your federal, you have your state VAs, and then you have your nonprofit, and then the different sectors that fall into that. So it was trying to bridge those historical gaps and really target how we're meeting the veterans where they're at. We know that not one system can fix everything, but we also know historically because of, lack of service support for our Vietnam veterans, for our WW2 veterans, dating all the way back to the first veteran who stepped their foot on the VA campus, you have to have those meaningful targeted partnerships. So in Washington State, especially for VA Puget Sound, we serve as a trusted partner to the VA to catch those individuals who may not benefit from, you know, historical therapy type services, so outdoor recreations, who need direct housing. Well, we own houses in the VA Puget Sound, so we can do that placement. It's not about any type of monetary transition. It's literally just a targeted partnership to be able to serve as that targeted whole health center of care. And again, I come back to the emphasis on whole health because it's not just serving or triaging the immediate, identifiable needs. It's identifying the secondary needs and how we can support that. If that answers your question. Oh,
Yes, thank you. And how so your organization has been affected by the cuts, not been affected by the cuts, or can you just explain
no, I'm
how
happy
this
to
impacts you?
elaborate on that. So earlier, about a month ago, President Trump and Mr. Musk froze federal grants, as most of you or all of you know at this point. So I had to put an immediate freeze to our suicide prevention program, which the senator and I and other key stakeholders have talked about. It caused an immediate overnight panic. We had people enrolled, we had people that were getting support services, case management, um, immediate suicidal ideation services. All these things were compounding. And overnight, I literally had to lay off 60% of my staff just for our mental health division, which caused a huge uproar. And we had to navigate everyone to VA Puget Sound. And for the entire suicide prevention behavioral health division, that is a very overwhelming thing to get a call on a Friday at 4 o'clock, which any of us who've worked in this service know you primarily get. But at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and I'm calling, all the leaders of the VA going, hey, I'm sending over 80 veterans, I'm sending over 100 veterans because we don't have the sheer support and assets. But then to do that, and then that following Monday, get a call and say, oh yeah, we're going to turn the funding stream back on. It's not a short sell to say we're toying with veterans, and it's just not acceptable. So it affects us directly, but it also now is the same situation, but now flipping on our very VA employees. So when you look at the practical application of that, the reduction of force is essentially what this is, right? The reduction of force is going to cause those access points to have less of the services that have been supportive. In this case, again, the earlier efficacy test during last year, based on that marketing campaign, we had a 94% as an entire system, 94% success rate in veterans actually starting to trust that system. Now, these same veterans who have worked in that system, received care out of that system, who are advocating for that system, are now coming to us and saying, well, my primary care just got laid off. The medicine I was receiving is now they're down to one, pharmacist. These are things we're actually seeing. So yes, we felt the immediate impact a month ago. Now the VA is feeling that same immediate impact. And my question is, where does it stop?
Thank you.
All right, and now we'll go to Edward with GovExec.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again, Senator, and everyone else for joining and hosting this call today. This is kind of a two-part question. The first part is there was a press call last week with Senator Blumenthal and Representative Takano kind of discussing the same issues with the cuts at VA. One of the things that Senator Blumenthal mentioned was that he heard that all VA research grants are being cut. So I was just curious to know if this is something that you've heard, Senator, and what the potential impact of this would be moving forward for the department.
I'm happy to have some of our folks speak to that too. That is frightening to me, that to have all of the VA research grants stopped. the VA research is extremely critical and looks at unique things that veterans themselves face, whether it's PTSD, whether it is having lost a limb in war, it's the circumstances that are in their background as they seek mental health, is a bit different than the vast majority of our population. And losing that research means that our veterans will not get the quality care that they deserve, that we promised them when we asked them to serve our country for all of us.
Mm. And this question is probably more for Christian. I heard there's some reports coming out, and I've talked to some VA researchers as well, that VA has extended the provided 90-day extension for NTE appointments. But again, I think this is moving forward. I don't know if it's retroactive. Despite that, what impact do you see some of these cuts already having moving forward? I know, like you mentioned as well, some of these impacts aren't going to be felt for several years. So it seems like even if there is a temporary pause, there's a lot of confusion. There are research projects and trials that have already been impacted by this. So if you could potentially discuss, even with some of these steps to kind of potentially limit the impact, what you see moving forward that could happen because of what VA and has already done before or so far.
Yeah, totally, Edward. And just to elaborate on what Senator Murray said, yeah, we had previously seen this past year research grants cut back. The budget amount for our basic grants was reduced. And then I did hear from colleagues what you were saying. That this happened after I left, but I did hear from colleagues that the grant amount was further reduced, and that is really difficult. The grants were already, to conduct research for several, because most of our research studies are conducted over a period of several years, up to about 5 years, typically 4 or 5 years, and it gets really tight really fast. And so to have the grant reduced, you end up nickel and diming, instead of the danger is you don't collect the data that you really need to answer the research question. How do we best develop this, again, like the example of the pulmonary team, and doing proactively using the electronic health record to identify vets whose care has a significant gap that we can fix. You end up not investing in the data you need to answer that question. Does this improve their care? Does this actually prevent a case of pneumonia? Does this prevent hospitalization? Does it improve their experience of care? Do they trust the VA? You end up leaving some of those things out. And then what you were saying about the back and forth, it is so disruptive, because you have to, you build these research teams over time, and you develop a research protocol. It's an iterative process. We typically have these research protocols, we develop them, they get reviewed, problems come up, reviewers will identify problems, you revise it, you do it again. It's a long-term process. And these kinds of firings, and like you said, even with the NTEs, them putting a hiring freeze of 90 days, people will leave, and you're gonna have studies that are in progress right now that are going to lose critical staff. Yeah, I just see it as highly disruptive. And again, it is, what we're doing is we're borrowing against our future, I think, is what we're doing here.
Well, and I would add, medical advancements in the VA have not only been critical to veteran-centered care, but we're talking about our entire country, and for that matter, the entire world has benefited. The pacemaker wouldn't exist without VA intervention. The CT scan, liver transplant surgeries, the nicotine patch. I mean, these are medical advancements that came from VA. I mean, the sheer impact on this, and I apologize, Christian, but just to emphasize that, I mean, these are things that have been historically funded and have a global impact on how we operate as a period. So just to add that as well.
Thank you for adding that. Too true.
And seeing no other hands raised, that we are just over time, we are going to go ahead and wrap the press call. This video will be distributed widely, and I just want to thank everyone for hopping on this morning.
Naomi, let me thank all of our participants too. you speak so passionately about our veterans, and I so appreciate that because that's who you have all served. But I know each of you have had personal impacts from being fired as well. And I want you to know our thoughts and prayers are with you, and our country should be standing behind every one of you. And I will do everything I can to make sure we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.